Share my screen, click over here. And so welcome to our start of our second lab today for our CS40 class, which I like to call Introduction to Hacking. Today, normally in the lab periods, it's a time for you to just work on stuff. Today, the actual lab content is very quick and easy, so that hopefully is not going to be too hard for you. Again, you can find the actual lab content by going to the topic 1, because we're on week 1 right now, CSS. If you click that and scroll all the way down to the bottom, then right here, at the top it says that what we're really going to be doing today for the most part is going over our CSS quiz that you'll have next week on Wednesday. But the instructions for the actual lab is right here. It's just taking basically a screenshot of making somebody on Twitter say something they wouldn't normally do. Shouldn't take a whole lot of time. The main sort of homework task that you have for this weekend is finishing up your web page, this project 0, which that will take a fair amount of time for most of you to do. Yeah, those of you who don't have lots of stuff going on Friday, today would be a good day to work on it. Again, it's due on Sunday, but anybody who collaborates for any reason in any way with students outside of class will get a 2-day extension until Tuesday at midnight. And yeah, highly encourage you to do that collaboration and to do it in a way that's going to actually help you learn and not just try to copy from people. Those of you who just came in, there's 2 handouts in the back, practice quizzes. Make sure you get one of each of those. We're going to be going over those in class today. Before we go over the practice quizzes, are there any questions about what you need to do for this project 0, or when it's due, or anything like that? We're gonna, in 2 minutes, we'll go over the practice quiz. We'll do that first. That'll take, depending on how many questions you all have just a half hour or the whole time period. And then the rest of the time will be for working on the lab. The QCL is up and running now, so if you do have questions about doing your project over the weekend, that's a great resource to go there. A number of the students, let's see, especially with this first project, anybody who's there's often like CS majors who are majoring over at MUD working in the QCL here. They're a great resource for this one, for this project, or people who have previously taken CS40 with me, all great resources. Some of the later projects, you'll want to find the people who have specifically taken CS40. But this one, lots of people should be able to help out. Any questions about anything? Okay, everybody just wants to get right to the quiz, practice quiz. Okay, so there's 2 handouts, 2 practice quizzes. You know, it's practice, it says practice at the top. Your real quiz on Wednesday will be exactly this same format with one exception. That exception is in these practice quizzes, I have 10 problems listed here, just so that you have a little bit extra practice, things to look at. For your actual quiz, there will only be 5 problems, so you'll have more time to think about them. The format of the quiz, again, the quiz is not Monday, it is Wednesday. So the first thing that you have in this class due is this project 0. That's the thing to focus on first. This quiz will help you a little bit with the project, but totally okay if you don't really think about this quiz until after the project and before Wednesday, because Wednesday is the day that the quiz will be actually happening. The format of the quiz is that the first 10 minutes of class will be the quiz, and then we will go over the quiz in class. We'll grade it in class. If for whatever reason you don't feel like those 10 minutes are going to be enough for you, and again, there'll only be 5 problems, so you have 2 minutes per problem, then I will be here in class 10 minutes prior before to the start of class. Anybody's welcome to come and get an extra 10 minutes on the quiz, so 20 minutes total. And if for whatever reason that doesn't feel like enough to you, you can come to office hours or schedule a time with me beforehand and just take it in my office. The goal for the quiz is that there shouldn't be any time pressure. It should just be like, can you think through the problems and understand the material? Another note about the format of the quiz is you can use any handwritten or printed material that you would like to use, just nothing electronic. So no laptops, cell phones, anything like that. But printed things like this CSS cheat sheet will be allowed and very useful. You can also bring with you the copies of the practice quizzes. And so if you write notes on the practice quizzes, then you'll have those with you for the actual quiz. So again, it's not a quiz on memorization, not a quiz on how fast you can do things. It's going to be a quiz on how well you actually understand the concepts. Any questions on format stuff or those sort of administrative details before we get to the content of the quiz? Okay, as we're talking about the content, you do have, that raises a question about the administrative sort of things, feel free to ask about those as we go along. Okay, so in class, we'll go over this practice quiz 1 today. The practice quiz 2, we won't go over, that'll just be a thing for you to practice with. And this practice quiz 1, both of them and your real quiz, they're divided into 2 sheets of paper. I recommend, so it's not front and back intentionally, I recommend just tearing it apart so you can see both sheets of paper actually at the same time. What I have written here on problem 1 are a bunch of CSS selectors. So recall that a CSS selector is the thing inside of CSS that goes to the left of this curly brace over here. And the quiz is going to be quizzing you on how these CSS selectors work. So there's all these like properties and values, things that do different formatting of the HTML. You don't have to know any of that. So like this box number 4 over here, you don't have to know any of this box number 4. Really, it's this box number 3 that's the most important one for the quiz. And the other, like box 1 and 2s, those are just sort of background information, but this box 3 over here is going to be the thing that's actually really important. In order to go over the quiz, I'm going to come back over here to the GitHub page for a second. And actually, before I forget, there's one more announcement. I've posted this topic starting next week, we're going to start going over Python. If you don't have previous experience with Python, there's some pre-lecture videos here that you can watch, which will make class go a little bit smoother for you. There's a lot of videos, but they're only like 5 minutes each, so it's less than an hour. It's like 30 minutes of actual videos. But then everybody should make sure that you have Python installed on your computer. There's a aside, I forgot to mention this before starting the quiz, but 2 tasks, the required actual task, make sure you have Python on your computer for Monday so you can follow along, and recommended videos, especially for people who maybe think you might struggle to keep up on Monday if you don't have background experience. Okay, but under the topic 1, CSS for the quiz, you can see all the files related to the quizzes are here. The one that's important to you is these files that end in .html. Those are our web page files. And the practice quiz 1.html is exactly practice quiz 1. It's exactly this HTML file on the back of your sheet. And so as I'm going over the quiz, I'm going to load this up in VS Code, and we're going to open it up in Firefox, and we'll see what these CSS selectors actually do. This will be a good way to practice for the quiz, make sure that you understand what the CSS selectors do, but you won't be able to do that actual part on the actual quiz. You won't have your laptop available. So at this point, some students like to follow along with your laptop, opening this up in VS Code. You're welcome to do that if you like. Some students like to just look at the paper and pencil printout. Okay, so here in VS Code, got practice quiz 1.html loaded up over here, and I'm going to load it up in Firefox. Again, I right click over here, do the copy path, come back over here, create a new tab, paste it here. And this is my web page. I'll go ahead and make it a little bit bigger for us like that. We haven't seen these broken images in class before, but this just means there's an image tag and the URL that points to, the image that points to is broken. It doesn't exist. And that's okay for the purposes of our quiz. There's just a whole bunch of random Latin text. Doesn't matter what the text is, doesn't matter what the pictures are. The only thing that matters is that there's a bunch of HTML tags that we're going to have to think about. Any questions about my setup that I have right here, or any questions at all so far? Okay. Okay, so now we're ready to actually talk about these problems. So it says, write the number of HTML tags that will get selected by each of the CSS selectors below. So it starts with simple ones at the top. We talked about like P is just a tag. We talked about things with the dot. So we talked about these two before. We'll go over them again, and then we'll see things like this way at the bottom that are pretty complex, and we'll talk about what they mean. So in order for us to check how many HTML tags actually get selected by one of these selectors, what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify my HTML a little bit. I'm going to add one of these style tags at the top so I can actually put in some CSS code, and we'll actually see like what does it affect when I do something. So this first CSS selector, what is it? It's the P tag, just a P by itself. And recall that a CSS selector is the stuff to the left of the curly brackets, so something like that. Here is the CSS selector. In order for us to tell what things are getting selected by it, I'm just going to do a background : red like that. So it will highlight in red all of the tags that got selected. So we can go through and we'll sort of try to predict, looking at the HTML over here, what things are going to get selected, and then we'll verify that we're correct or not by going to Firefox and checking. So here, the P, there's no like special punctuation, it's just a P. And so it means it's looking for P tags. There's a P tag right here and a P tag right here. So assuming that I didn't miss any, it looks like there's going to be just these two P tags that are going to get selected. So come back over to Firefox and I'll refresh to check my answer. And there are two things that got selected, this P up here, this P over here. And so the answer for the first problem is 2. There were 2 tags that got selected by the P. This thing in the middle over here, it kind of looks like a paragraph. Looks like maybe if you were thinking just select all the paragraphs, you might have thought this would turn red, but that's not actually a P tag. That is this block quote tag, something that we haven't talked about. And on your quiz, you might see random tags like this that we haven't discussed in class. And you'll just have to know that that's not a P tag. I don't know what it is, but it's not a P tag, so it doesn't get selected. So the answer for the first problem is 2, because this P right here and this P right here both getting selected by that CSS selector. Any questions about that? Okay, so number 2 here, going on with a dot bold. So the dot, again, means that it's going to find classes instead of tags. And so we have to go over to our HTML and find everything that has a class equals bold somewhere in it. So I see one right here. VS Code, helpfully, if you highlight something, highlight the word bold, it'll find all the other occurrences of the word bold. And so there's one here and one here. And I don't think there's any over here. Yeah, it's all plain text with the closing tag. So 2 bolds right there. And so if I change this dot bold like that, then my expectation, my hypothesis, we're computer scientists. Scientists make hypotheses and test their hypotheses. So my hypothesis is that these 2 things will get selected, and then I'll run an experiment as a good scientist to test that hypothesis. Over here, refresh, and 2 things did in fact get selected over here. And so again, the answer for the second problem is 2, because these 2 tags both got selected. So 2 here, 2 here. Any questions about that problem? Yes.
What was the dot doing again versus the kind of the normal?
Yeah, the question is, what's the difference between having the dot and not having the dot? When you don't have a dot in front of it, it means that it's looking for tags that match this text. So the tag is the very first thing inside of your angle brackets. So here, when I had P by itself like that, it's looking for just a P at the start of the angle bracket. It doesn't have to be only a P in the angle bracket. I could have something else like class equals example right here. And this will still get matched right here because it starts with a P. The name of this tag is a P. This is a P tag right here. And so if there's no dot, it's going to match all of the P tags. If I put a dot in front of here like this is no longer matching the P tags. This is matching the P classes. So we're just gonna save this right now, come back over to Firefox and see what's gonna happen. Refresh this, and you see that nothing gets selected because even though I have P tags, I don't have a P class anywhere. If you have a dot in front of it, it means you must have a class. If I were to change, say this H1 right here, add a class equals P to the H1, now dot P right here will match this class equals P, and this H1 will get highlighted. Right there. So you have to be pay close attention to, is there a dot or is there not a dot, and to know whether this P is the class P or it's the tag name P. And that sort of confusion about things is something that's very likely to be tested on the actual quiz, because that'll make sure that you actually know like what that dot's doing. Does that answer your question, Henry?
Yes. Yeah.
Jackson.
What does the span do? Because I see span a few times in this practice.
Question is, what does this span tag do? And there's two tags that are important for CSS, the span tag and the div tag. These tags have no formatting at all associated with them. Their only purpose, the span and the div tags, is to put classes on them so that you can put style formatting up here. So here, I made this span around Ipsum just so that I could use this class bold right here to make Ipsum have the bold formatting. That doesn't mean it's going to be formatted bold. I could, like when I had dot bold like this class bold is actually red background. So just because it says bold doesn't mean it's actually like what we normally think of as bold. So the only purpose of the span and the div tags is to sort of like hold these CSS information, these classes, and on your quiz, on your actual quiz, there are definitely going to be HTML tags that you haven't seen before, and you'll just have to know that it doesn't matter. All I have to do is know, does it match the class if it's a dot, or if there's no dot, does it match the name of it? Change this to span like this, no dot in front of it. It's going to find all of the span tags, no matter what the class is, whether it's italic or bold or no class at all. Save that, come over here, refresh. So it had those two bold ones, and then also this italic one right here. Does that answer your question? Yeah, go ahead.
So,
okay, so question is problem number 3. Now we're getting into more complicated things. We had P by itself, we had dot bold by itself. Now what is P dot bold? When you have an HTML tag, so the thing to the left of the dot does not have a dot in front of it. The P does not have a dot in front of it. So this is an HTML tag. And the thing to the right of the dot is a class. So this is saying all of the P tags that are the class bold. All of the P tags that are the class bold. Come back over here. Let's change this to P dot bold like this. Save this. Come back over here and refresh. And we can see that actually nothing is getting matched right now. Because even though we have P tags, and even though we have class bolds, we don't have any P tags that are both P tags and class bolds at the same time. In order to have an example of something that matches, I'm going to modify this first P class right here. Right now, I changed its class equal to example. Let's change its class equal to bold, like that. So P class equals bold. This is at the same time a P tag and something that's class bold. So this will satisfy P dot bold. Save that. Come up here, refresh. And this paragraph is both a P and a dot bold, so it gets matched. So when you have P dot bold, it must match both the tag on the left and the class on the right. Yes.
So P dot bold would not include span tags within P tags that have the class bold.
Question is about like tags inside of tags. And so here we have a span tag that's this italic right here. If we change that to being bold inside, this is not going to get matched. This will not get matched. Only this one right here will get matched. So for the actual like HTML file that I gave you, the answer was 0 because we had no P classes that were also, sorry, we had no P tags that were also bold classes. For this modification where I've added this class equals bold right here, the answer would now be 1 because this P is both a P and a class equals bold at the same time. This one right here does not get matched because even though it is a class bold, and even though it's inside of a P, it is still a span tag and not a P tag. So right now, this is the only thing that matches this P dot bold up here. These are all great questions. And as we're going through these, you're going to see that these are going to start getting a little bit complicated and a little bit mind-bending. And as you're preparing for the quiz, a good way to do it is just to like do tests like I'm doing. Write something up here, one of the example problems, and make a guess about what's going to get selected, what's not going to get selected, and then jump over to Firefox to see if your guess was correct. So there's the next couple problems have more variations of P and bold together, but any questions about this combination? Yes.
Sorry, I just want to double check again. So like if like the first example there was no dot, and then the one that you have dots, you need a class with it. If it has a dot, should that be a class like with the selector?
Exactly. Whatever's to the right of the dot must be a class. Okay, so the next one, problem 4, the only difference between problem 4 and problem 3 is there's a space between the P and the dot bold. There's a space right here. And normally, in most cases, CSS is not white space sensitive, and so most cases spaces don't matter. But this is a case where spaces do matter, and we'll see that things are going to change. So again, problem 3, P dot bold, problem 4, P space dot bold, like that. And what we're going to see is that this will no longer match this tag right here. Whenever you have a space between two CSS selectors, so here I have one on the left, just a plain old P CSS selector. Here we have a class CSS selector on the right. Whenever we have a space, this means that this thing over here must be a, what we call a descendant of P. So if I mentioned a long time ago in class that these tags have sort of like a family hierarchy that we can talk about. We think about this HTML tag right here. It has two children, this head and this body. Children are examples of descendants. This title tag is also a descendant of this HTML tag. This head tag and this body tag, people will talk about as siblings of each other because they are both children of their parent HTML. And so this span tag right here, this span tag is a child of this H1 tag. This span tag right here is a child of this P tag right here. Here, when I have this P space dot bold, it's going to match this P tag right here, and it's going to match this P tag right here with this P. Then it's going to go inside only the children, only the descendants of the P tags, and look for things that are dot bold. Up here, we have a span that is dot bold, but it is not inside of a P tag in any way. So this will not get matched. Here we have a span that is bold, and so it's inside of a P tag, so that one's going to get matched. This P tag over here has nothing inside of it that's dot bold, so nothing's going to get matched. Let's save that. After we see what's going to happen, I'll go over all of that again. Come back over here, F5, and you can see that there's only one match over here, and it's no longer the entire paragraph. It's only this short snippet of the paragraph. Only this snippet right here only this span class equals bold right here got matched. And again, this got matched because the class is equal to bold on the descendant. The class is equal to bold on the descendant on the span tag. And over here, it's inside of a P tag. So P over here, P over here. So this P matches this P and this P, but this dot bold only matches this dot bold here. I made this class bold like that, just as an example earlier. Let's go ahead and take that away. It has no impact on whether we'll match the bolds inside. I'm going to save that, come back over here, refresh, and you see that we're still matching the span tag right here. The span tag is still turning out to be red because what's important is that the span tag has the class equals bold. The P tag, it doesn't matter what class the P tag has, doesn't matter at all. It matters what class the span tag has because the span is the descendant of P.
Can you remind us which part of the code changed? I think that also equals.
Yes, so I think if we do that, then this is going to be back to the original document from that I gave you. Come back over here, and there's nothing that is a bold class inside of a P tag. And so from the HTML that I actually gave you, the answer for number, this number 4. Yes, the answer for number 4 here for the HTML that I actually gave you is also 0. Again, I want to highlight the difference between number 3 and number 4 about the difference between this space right here. So we're going to focus on this P tag, focus on this line right here, and we're going to see that if I change this class from italic to bold like this, it's going to match P space dot bold because span class equals bold is inside as a descendant of P. Come back over here, refresh. If I take away this space right here, now because they're touching each other, it's no longer this must be a descendant of this thing. It's that this thing over here must be the actual class of this thing. And so when I save this, come over here, refresh, nothing is going to match because even though we have bold inside of the P, the bold is not applied directly to the P. If the P and the dot bold are touching up here, it must be applied directly to the P. If they're not touching, then it's not applied directly, it's applied to a descendant. So here, now they're touching again. I'm going to move this bold like that over to this P. So now the bold is applied directly to the P. It's touching up here, so it's going to match. Save that, come over here, refresh, it matches, and we select the entire paragraph. If I come up here and add a space in between P and dot bold, then this right here is not going to match that because the bold is applied directly to the P, and we want, in order for this to match, it must be applied to a descendant of the P. As an example, the span tag. Come over here, refresh, doesn't match. Yes.
So does the second part only apply to direct descendants, like the class of direct descendants, or what if you did like body space dot bold?
Great question. The question is, here we have a space, and does it apply only to the children, what we'd call the direct descendants of P, or does it apply to all descendants? And so the particular question is, what if we do body dot bold? So here we have body, and there's going to be a lot of bold classes that are descendants of this body tag, but only this one here is actually a child of the body tag. So let's save that, come over here, refresh, and we can see that it does in fact match all of the descendants, all 3 of them right here. If you wanted to match just the child, and this, I don't know, it's like problem 8 or 9 or something, you want to match just direct children and not all descendants, it's this sort of greater than sign like that. And this says this thing over here must actually be a direct child. Come back over here, refresh, and only this actual child of the body tag is being matched. So the greater than sign matches children. A space matches descendants. No space matches only the tag on the left that has the exact class on the right. Yes.
So how does it work with div? Yeah, like div. Does div have descendants, or does div just like wrap in the?
So the question is, how does this work with div? And the answer is that all of this works exactly the same no matter what the what the HTML tag actually is. So here div has an image inside of it. So this image is a child of this div tag right here. Just like this div tag is a child of body and this body tag is a child of HTML. So divs are special in the sense that they have no special formatting. They only exist for us to be able to style them with CSS up here. But like when we're talking about children, descendants, anything like that, there's nothing special about them. It works exactly the same between all the different tags. Did that answer your question? All fantastic questions so far. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to jump back over to the cheat sheet for a second so we can see like all this information is actually things that are already on the cheat sheet over here that we've talked about. So we have the basic selectors, the element name, the dot class name. So it's trying to remind you that, so again, element is a synonym for tag. The name of a tag or the name of an element is just the very first thing in that tag. So like the P by itself without a dot in front of it, that's the element name. If you put a dot in front of it, then that's going to get you the class name. And then over here under the combinators, combinators are a way of combining different selectors together. At the very bottom down here, it says parent space descendant. So if you see a space between two things, that means that the thing on the right must be a descendant of the thing on the left somehow. Here, if you have the greater than sign, it means the thing on the right must be a direct child of the thing on the left somehow, child of a parent. So that's, yeah, at least for me, that's enough. Looking at this, I know exactly what it means. If that text up here is not enough for you, write some notes. But this is like, yeah, as I would be working through this quiz, I would just be looking at this box number 3 up here to remind myself of what all the different punctuation and formatting means. So the question is, repeat parent greater than sign child. What exactly does that mean? And it means this matches any tag where the thing on the right is a direct child of the thing on the left. So that means like here we have body greater than dot bold. So first find all the body tags. There's only one body tag. So the thing to the left of the greater sign matches this right here. Then we find the greater than sign. So we're only looking at children of body. And to the right, we have the dot bold. So we're looking at elements that are children of body whose class is bold. So here's one. This one up here has a class of bold. It's a descendant of body, but it is not a child of body. So this one does not get matched by the greater than sign. Similarly, this one down here does not get matched. Only this one right here gets matched. Yes. Question is, why does this not get matched? Is it because of this span right here? The answer is because it doesn't matter whether this was a span or a div or a P or whatever it is. It just happens to be a span. The answer is that because this is not a child of body. This span is a child of H1, which is a child of body. So span is a grandchild of body. Span is a descendant of body, but not a child of body. And so when we use the greater than sign only matches children, so it doesn't match. If there was no greater than sign, just a space, the space matches all descendants, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so it would get matched here.
What's the difference between the two siblings?
Between what two siblings? So the question is about these two things up here. We haven't talked about those yet. So we've talked about these top 2 ones on basic selectors and these bottom 2 ones on combinators. We'll get to the rest when we get to them. The next one I want to talk about is this hashtag ID name. So what is the hashtag? You see over here that we have, so this div, for example, has an ID equals header. And if I want to match things that have an ID equals something, then what you do is you use a hashtag to do that. So if I said hashtag header like that, that's going to match this div right here. The hashtag means it matches an ID. The dot means that it matches a class. So hashtag header, save that, come over here, refresh, and you can see that it matches way up here the div that surrounds this image. So the hashtag means it matches these IDs. There's absolutely no difference between an ID and a class other than the syntax that you use to do them. ID, hashtag, class, dot. But otherwise, they're 100% exactly the same from Firefox's perspective. From a programmer's perspective, if I see ID, my intuition is that it's like an identification. There's only going to be exactly one of these headers somewhere. But if I see a class, it's like there's a lot of people in this class, so it might be 1, it might be 0, it might be 1,000. I don't know. ID, it's possible to have multiple things with the same ID, but just the intuition is that, or the idea is that you probably only have one thing with that. Question?
Yeah, I was wondering.
I was just explaining what an ID is. If we come back over to quiz 1 right here, the next thing after, oops, I guess we did 4. We didn't do 5 yet. Let's go ahead and do 5. What I was just talking about was sort of number 6. We'll do 5 after we finish number 6 with the hashtag. We have H1 hashtag top. H1 hashtag top. This will only match. It first matches all tags that are H1 tags and then matches those tags that have an ID top. We have an H1 tag right here. It has an ID top right here, so it'll match this tag right here. Save that. Come back over here, F5. It matches that. So the answer is 1 on the quiz for number 6, H1 hashtag top. If I were to change this, move the ID top, just take it away like that. Then we have an H1 matches this. There's no ID top, so it doesn't match that at all. And so if we save that, come over here, refresh, not going to select anything. And similarly, if we added an ID top anywhere else, ID equals top like that, it's not going to get matched because this is a div tag, not an H1 tag. So H1 ID equals top, matches this right here. The answer is 1. I'll be going again.
So the difference between 4 and 6 is 4 spaces for the class and 6 hashtags for the ID.
So yeah, number 3 right here, you have a dot means class. Number 6 down here, the hashtag means ID.
But then I was starting 4 and 6 with space. How do you identify it?
So the question is then compare number 4 and number 6. The space over here has no relation to the dot in the hashtag. Let's come back over here. And if I do H1 space hashtag top like this, what this means is first find the H1 tags. Here's the H1 tag. Then look in the descendants for anything with an ID hashtag top. Right here, this has an ID hashtag ID top, but it is not a descendant of H1. It is the actual H1, so this will not match. Save that, come over here, refresh. It does not match. Come back over to VS Code. If I move this ID top out of the H1 tag into the span tag right here, like that, this span tag is a descendant of this H1 tag. So first we'll find the H1s, here's the H1, then we'll go into the descendants, find all the hashtag tops, go into the descendants, here's a hashtag top, find that, save that, come over here, refresh, and it matches the ipsum right here. If I come back over to VS Code, remove the space so that it's H1 hashtag top like this, now this is not going to match over here because H1 no space hashtag top must match exactly the H1 with the ID equals top inside of it. This H1 has no ID, so it can't match. This ID equals top is not an H1, so it can't match either. Save that, come over here, refresh. Again, nothing matches. So the space or no space, it doesn't matter like whether it's a hashtag or a dot over here on the right, or even something more complicated. The space or no space is just, does the thing on the right apply directly to the thing on the left, or does it apply to a descendant of the thing on the left? Great question. There were a bunch of hands up before. I'll get to all of your questions in a second. Any questions just on what we just talked about? Go ahead.
So the space dictates what applies to.
The space dictates whether it applies to the tag itself or all descendants. And similarly, if you have a greater than sign, I guess so far we've seen 3 options of ways to connect the thing on the right with the thing on the left. You can have them touching each other, you can have a space, or you can have a greater than sign. Touching each other means it applies directly to that tag. A space means that it applies to all descendants. A greater than sign means it applies just to the direct children.
And what's the direct children?
Question is, what's the difference between applying to the children directly and the tag itself? So here we have an H1 tag. Here we have a child of H1. Span is a child of H1 right here. This greater than sign means the thing on the right must be a child of H1. So this will match right here because span, not only is it a descendant, but it's the particular type of descendant that is a child. Matches. Come over here, refresh, it matches. If we got rid of that, so now it's not matching children, it's matching you. Like it's not matching your children, it's matching you. You have to be the ID top, not your children, the ID top. So this H1 itself would have to have the ID top inside of it. It does not. So if we save that, come over here, F5, nothing matches. Back to VS Code. If we change this ID top so it's no longer in the span class, but directly applied to the H1 like that, now it's the direct application up here, over here, refresh, and it matches. Good questions? Yes.
So the answer is 1.
So the answer is 1, yes. For number 6, H1 hashtag top, the only thing it matches is this right here. Yes, Raymond. Question is, what's the difference between a class and an ID? And the only difference between a class and an ID is that a class, you use dots in the CSS, and an ID, you use the hashtag. That, from a technical perspective, that's the only difference. The reason we have 2 of them is just so that it turns out that you often want to have like styles that only apply to exactly one thing. And in order just to let the programmer know that it applies to exactly one thing, use an ID. But it's actually technically possible to have many header IDs. Nothing bad will happen. And it's possible to have only a single, for example, bold class, and nothing bad will happen. So by convention, we use IDs when you have only one thing, classes when you have multiple, but there's actually no technical difference. It's just a message to whoever's reading your code about how many times you intend to use that formatting. Jackson.
Can you just quickly go over a child versus a descendant?
So the question is going over a child versus a descendant. And so if we have body right here, div is an example of a child of body. Image is an example of a child of div because image is inside div. But image is not a child of body because image is a child of div. So image is a grandchild of body because image is a child of div and div is a child of body. So image here is a descendant of body, div is a descendant of body. But yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it has to be
Yeah.
So I just want to go over this just to make sure that I have it. So for number 6, if there's no space, does that means it applies to the original all children, all descendants? Or
No space means that only the tag itself has to have the whatever comes left to the right, whether it's a class or an ID.
okay.
And only that one tag.
Okay. Only original, and space, that means it applies to original and descendants.
Space means only descendants.
Okay, only descendants. Got it. And greater than means only children.
And greater than means only children.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so back to problem 5. Got ahead of myself with the different types of connector options here. This comma. With this comma, the way to read the comma is as or. The thing on the left or the thing on the right. So either the p tags or the dot bold tags. Let's come back up here. Let's do p comma dot bold like that. And let's make this back to how it was at the beginning. That I believe was an italic. There we go, bold, italic, bold. Okay. So P no space dot bold, that's P and class equals bold. P and dot bold, P comma dot bold. Even though there's a space right here, that space doesn't matter. It's only the comma that matters. This reads P or bold class, P or dot bold. So this is going to match anything that has a P tag or anything that has a class equals bold. Save that, come over here, refresh. And so here's our P tags, one here, and then bold tag up here, bold tag down here. This one here is not a P tag. This one up here is not a P tag. This one here is not bold. This one here is not bold, but the comma means or, so we match either of them. So there's 4 things that got selected on problem number 5. Yeah.
As far as the quiz goes, like let's say there's a span bold within the P, does that count as 1 or 2?
Good question. So the question is, what happens when, so originally this span right here had class equals italic. What would happen if I change that to class equals bold like this? The answer is that we're going to match both this tag here and this tag over here. So this right here in Firefox is gonna look exactly the same as it did before, because there's a inspect right there. This span right here is kind of hidden. They both have this red formatting applied to it. And so because this one's just doubled up red, you can't notice that, but it actually still gets selected by the CSS selector. For the quiz, I'm not going to give you a trick situation like that. But one of the reasons why we're spending a lot of time on these classes or on these CSS selectors is that about a month from now, when we do our web scraping, the way that you're going to be extracting information off of eBay, for example, if there's a price that you want to extract, you will be writing the CSS selector that goes through the eBay web page and extracts that, finds the HTML tag that has that particular price associated with it. And you'll need to know your CSS selectors really well in order to be able to do that. So that'll have an effect at that point. Doesn't have an effect at this point. So you're never going to have this ambiguous situation on the quiz where something's inside something else when it applies to this comma. But good question. Any other questions on that problem? Yeah. The question is, does the comma apply to all descendants? And the answer is, it applies to absolutely everything. So up here we have an H1 tag. This H1 tag, inside of it has this bold tag right here. This span class equals bold is not a descendant of any P tag. Again, using the family metaphor, it is totally unrelated to any P tag. There is no P anywhere in its like ancestor hierarchy, and there's no P inside of it. It's just totally unrelated. But it still gets matched because the comma is an or. There happens to be a space after this comma. The space would have a different meaning if there was no comma there, but because there's a comma right here, the space has no meaning. This has no descendant, ancestor, sibling, any sort of family relationship with P. Just anywhere in the document, if you have class equals bold, it matches, or anywhere in the document, if you have class equals P, it matches. Question is, what happens if you get rid of that space and everything still works just fine? So it could be a space, doesn't have to be. To the left and to the right of this comma, you can have any arbitrarily complex CSS selector, so things that we've seen before. So like here we have the class equals bold. Maybe I only want to select this class equals bold right here and not this class equals bold right here for whatever reason. So I could have P comma H1 direct child dot bold like this. Come back over to Firefox. And now it does not select this one down here because this one is not a direct child of an H1. This one is a direct child of an H1. And so it selects this one or all the P tags. So these things can get arbitrarily complex. You can keep nesting them and nesting them, building out big complex formulas. On the lab, on the quiz, you're not going to have super big complex ones. But you'll start having sort of, I don't know, medium complex ones like this down here. Any questions on number 5? Okay, we talked about number 6. Number 7 is similar to number 6. We'll just go ahead and do it. It's just a with the hashtag, the ID. So it's image, hashtag, header like that. Here we have a div ID equals header. Inside of it, there's an image, but that image is inside of it. It's not directly applied to the header. So if we save that, come over to Firefox, refresh, nothing gets selected on number 7. The answer is 0. If I either had a space right here, then this image would get selected. This div would not get selected. Or if I had a greater than sign, then this image would get selected. This div would not get selected. Because the problem has neither of those, they're directly attached. This image does not get selected. Okay, number 8. Again, with the descendant relationship, h1 descendant of div like that. Come over here. We have our h1 right here. There is no div inside of the h1 tag. There's a span inside of it, no div inside of it. So when I say div space h1 like that, or was it h1 space div? h1 space div like that. We have our h1. Space, again, is the descendant relationship. There are no descendants divs of h1. And save that. Over here, refresh. Still nothing gets selected. So the answer for number 8 there, also 0. Now number 9 and 10, we have this plus and this little squiggle. People will pronounce the squiggle either as squiggle or tilde. And those correspond to these combinators up here. I was asked about before, so we'll talk about these ones up here next. And that's what you're going to be responsible for the quiz. Everything in this combinators column and these first 3 things on the basic selectors, you don't need to know the star or the square brackets. Okay. So yeah, back over here. So we have the tilde, which is a general sibling, and the plus is an adjacent sibling. We'll just try these out, see what happens. So we'll try h1 tilde div like that. So we have an h1. We do have a div that's a sibling up there that's on top of it. So come over here, refresh, and we see that it actually doesn't get selected. h1 down here, div up above. What if we do h1 tilde p like that? Save that. Come over here, refresh, and we can see that the tilde matches these things over here. So on the cheat sheet, this is a little bit of a misnomer just for space reasons. It says general sibling, adjacent sibling. These are only like siblings that are farther down in the page. So over here, we have the h1. Div is like in a normal family, we consider older siblings to be siblings as well. So div is a sibling of h1, but it's an older sibling, so that doesn't match. We need the younger siblings in order to match. So h1 tilde p matches these p's right here because they're younger siblings of the h1. Question?
My question is why h1 doesn't also get selected itself in both the adjacent and the general.
Question is, why does the h1 not get selected itself? And it's sort of in parallel to the space. When we do h1 space p, this only selects p's that are descendants of h1s, does not select the h1. When we do the h1 greater than p, this only selects p's that are children of h1, doesn't select the h1. And so similarly, when we do the h1 tilde p, it only selects p's that are younger siblings of h1, doesn't select the h1. They could have designed it so that it also selected the thing on the left, but when you get, this just turns out to be an easier thing to work with. Jackson.
When you say younger sibling, does that have to be literally under it?
Yeah.
Okay, not above it.
Yeah. And so the h1 tilde p matches all the p's that are siblings that are after h1. If we had a p inside of this block quote like this, just reformatting that block quote a little bit so that we could see a p tag. Here I've put this p tag inside of this block quote. This p tag is not a sibling of this h1 tag. Come over here, refresh, and you can see that p tag is not being selected because there's that block quote. This p, I don't know, it's like a cousin or something of h1. P is a child of block quote. Block quote is, I guess, h1 is its aunt. P is its niece, nephew. P is a child of block quote. Block quote is a sibling of H1. And so P is not a sibling of H1. And so P does not get selected by the tilde. Yes.
Is there any, is it gonna be like a trick question with this? Like a child number that's not formatted that way, or it's
The HTML will be formatted in a reasonable way. Yeah. My goal is not to like test your ability to find weird formatting things in the HTML. My goal is just to make sure that you understand the basic selector relationships. And so the HTML will be formatted nicely in a similar way to the HTML that I gave you. Go ahead.
I don't understand the difference between.
Okay, yeah, so we've talked about the tilde. We have not talked about the plus. So tilde, H1 tilde P means anything, all the siblings after the H1. If we do the plus, like that, H1 plus P, whoops, there we go. Refresh that. Now only the very first P tag after the H1 gets selected, and this one down here is not the first one after it, it's the second one, and so it does not get selected. So the plus, the adjacent sibling, adjacent means that it's your direct, whoever was born immediately after you, it gets selected, but like the really young children, we don't care about them. The tilde means we care about all of your younger siblings. So the question is, do we do the siblings that can be above us? So here's the H1, here's the div, H1 plus div, like that, save. Come over here, refresh, and we'll see there's no highlighting going on in this div up here. If we were to highlight, just so that we can see what that div would look like when it's highlight, we'll do a hashtag header. It's not a hashtag, there we go, hashtag header right here, that'll match that div so we can see what it looks like when it's highlighted. We can see that that was not happening before, so we never match the siblings above us, we only match the ones below us. Do you have a question, Raymond? Question is, what exactly is a sibling? The answer is, so if div is a parent, sorry, div is a child of body, and H1 is also a child of body, if you're two children that have the same parent, then you are siblings of each other. So all of these things, div, H1, P, block quote, they're all siblings of each other because they have the same parent.
And H1 is the adjacent sibling to.
And H1 is the adjacent sibling of div, P is the adjacent sibling of H1, block quote is the adjacent sibling of P, and so on, yeah. Yes?
So 2 questions. First of all, the sibling has to be a direct, all the siblings have to be direct descendants of the same parent, is that right?
In order for 2 things to be siblings, they must be direct, they must be children of the same parent.
Okay. And then second question, if you put for the first part of the selector, something like a key where there's like multiple keys on the page, how does it know which one to do with it?
Yeah, so whenever you have one of these things that somehow is chaining together multiple options, any one of these combinators over here, whether it's the plus, tilde, the greater than, or the space, what it always does is it first matches everything to the left, finds all of them, and then only looking at that subset, do these things to the right. So if we have P space span, it'll first find all of the P tags. There's 2 P tags here and here, and then it'll find all of the spans. So there's that span. It's a span, but it's not inside a P tag, so it won't find that. This span is inside of this P tag, it will find that. This P tag currently doesn't have any spans, but if we added one like that, then it would also get matched. Come back over Firefox, refresh, and match. I guess I put a P tag in the block quote, so it's matching that one as well. So it'll, whenever you have any of the combinators that finds all of the things on the left, then applies the rule to find all the things on the right. See, I'm gonna go on to just make sure we do this very last problem here. So we've talked about h1 tilde p, but we stopped at h1 tilde p. Let's come back over here. h1 tilde p, remind us what that looks like. Come back over here, f5. So these are both the siblings of this p tag right here. And then it also has this next combinator, this greater than sign of span, like that. h1 tilde p greater than span. So first find all the h1s. There's only one h1 right here. Then find all of the children, all the sibling p tags that are siblings of h1. That finds this p tag and this p tag down here. There's two p tags that it finds. And then inside of those p tags, find all of the span tags. So this p tag right here has a span tag right here. I've just added a new span tag in front of this p tag right there. It'll match that span tag, F5. So we got two matches. But this span tag didn't actually exist on the HTML that I gave you. It was like that, what I gave you. And so the answer is 1. There's only one span tag, one tag that this thing up here matches on the quiz. That one right there. So again, on Wednesday, there will be 5 of these. Probably think about 5 from the bottom half rather than 5 from the top half. So make sure that you can do the bottom ones, the harder ones. And you have that other quiz with totally different HTML, totally different tags that you can use to practice. And if you do have questions about like, oh, I was typing this in, I think the answer is 3 or whatever you think it is, but you're not 100% sure, on Monday or in office hours on Tuesday, you can come ask me and we'll work through the problem and see if you got the right thing. Any questions about any of these CSS selectors? Yes.
This is for number 10 again. What would you label span as? I know it's supposed to be span is supposed to be direct child of P.
Right.
So the direct child is the one that is right, well, I guess directly under it, correct? Or is it within it? I'm confused between the Descendant as well.
Let's open up another cheat sheet. Here. So for the HTML cheat sheet on problem number 1 right here, it seems like there's been just a lot of confusion about the all these family relationships, and anything that is between two tags is called the children. Whatever tags appear between the opening and the closing tag are called the children of this tag right here. And so as an example, div is a child of body, h1 is a child of body, block quote is a child of body, but this image is not a child of body because this image is a child of div, so it's a grandchild of body. Did that answer your question somewhere in there? Okay.
So then if you, what's the next slide? And I wrote a line with indentation as image. That would be sibling.
Yeah, so if I added another thing here, span test, this span is a sibling of image, which is a child of div, and so span is also a grandchild of body. And then again, it's not the indentation that matters. I could write something like this. You're not going to have something weird like this on the quiz. Things will be formatted nicely on the quiz, but you could have something like this, and span here is still a grandchild of body. We just normally indent things so that it's obvious what the family relationship with the family tree is between all these tags.
The answer is 1.
For the last one, number 10, the answer is 1. So all been excellent questions. Any other questions about anything? Okay, there's about 10 minutes or so left in the lab. You can likely finish the actual lab assignment itself during that time, or get started on the project. Or if you do have questions about anything, happy to work with you one-on-one on whatever those questions are. So yeah, now it's your time to use however you see fit.